You're tuning into Black and White Sports on YouTube. The no-holds-barred truth on sports. The main event starts now.
All right, guys and gals, we are going to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders because we got a couple of things involving not only Antonio Pierce and Mark Davis and some things the owner is seeing out of this new rejuvenated coaching staff. I say new, but new head coach anyway. I understand Antonio Pierce has been on the staff. And we've also got something, and I think this is very important. It seems Antonio Pierce is leaning on a two-time Super Bowl former head coach that is from the Parcells tree. I mean, this guy's got Parcells and Belichick ties because Belichick was also on that New York Giants staff, but Antonio Pierce is leaning heavy on Tom Coughlin, and I think that's very wise, and we'll take a little glimpse back in history of Tom Coughlin's resume, but my God, it's impressive. I mean, what he did with an expansion Jacksonville Jaguars team. Look, Super Bowl teams with the Giants aside, you just need to look at the Jaguars and realize that Tom Coughlin was a hell of a football coach. And obviously, he's going to have a wealth of knowledge that he can give his former player when it comes to coaching. And look, we think Antonio Pierce kind of runs a loosey-goosey ship, but Tom Coughlin was one of the hardest asses that's ever been into the league, okay? We're talking about a true Parcells-Belichick kind of guy. We also found out that Coughlin learned how to adapt to his players over time, and many believe that's why he won those Super Bowls. So let's get to this. 2 years ago, an interim head coach took the Raiders to the playoffs, a feel-good story that resulted in Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels getting hired. It's still, boy, it turned out to be a bad decision. And I think it's one of the reasons why Antonio Pierce probably ends up getting this job. I can tell you this. I think there's a chance that if he beats the Dolphins today, he gets named the head coach in the middle of the following week. I think there's a world where that could happen. I do. Owner Mark Davis is acutely aware that a similar situation could be in his future. While Davis has not specifically stated what interim coach Antonio Pierce needs to do for the full-time job to be his in 2024 and beyond, sources say Davis has noticed the energy in the building that Pierce brought when he was elevated after McDaniels' firing. Well, you get a wet blanket out of the room that's smelling moldy and stale, it's going to make everything a little bit better around there. While pleasantly surprised in how the team has responded to back-to-back wins, Davis is said to be impressed. And why wouldn't he be? After McDaniels' firing, players celebrated like they'd won a game. They then won their next two contests, and some players smoked cigars in the locker room after the win over the Giants in Pierce's first game in charge. Players with whom Davis had consulted prior to the shocking move to clean house included Max Crosby, Josh Jacobs, and Devontae Adams. They've been outspoken about the new feel of the building and what that can do. Will the rest of the season resemble the run to the playoffs that the Raiders had under Rich Bisaccia to end the 2021 season? Time will tell. That team was 3-1 when John Gruden resigned, and Pierce took over a 3-5 team this year, a much steeper climb. And I will say this. Look, there was definitely a sense that John Gruden in that locker room got a raw deal. And not only did they like Bisaccia and rally behind him, it was also a way to double middle finger the NFL and Roger Goodell to rally behind specifically a Gruden guy and take a Gruden team into the playoffs. I mean, Gruden got screwed. He finally had got that team in his image and design and lost his job. In bringing the Patriot way to Las Vegas, Davis went away from the Raider way. With the NWA-loving Pierce leading the team, there is thought that the Raider way is back. In fact, Davis noted privately this week that last week's primetime win over the Jets felt like a real, true home game for the first time in a while. Yikes. It's not just football. The non-football administrators and the business side staffers can feel it too. Davis consulted several team leaders before firing McDaniels, and he does appear to value the opinion of the locker room. If that's the case, score one for Pierce. Players have commented publicly and privately about how things are finally headed in the right direction and how his motivational tactics are working. The Raiders play the Dolphins today as the schedule gets more challenging again in the next two games as well. An uphill battle perhaps, but at least the early returns have caught the eye of the Raiders owner. I actually think between those two games, the Chiefs beating the Chiefs, in my opinion, is probably more likely, okay? At least the idea of possibly splitting with the Chiefs is probably a big deal, okay? It's probably a big deal. Now, let's go over to this because it ties in with Antonio Pierce and where he is getting help. Pierce went undrafted out of Arizona in 2001, signed with Washington. After 4 seasons there, he signed with the Giants as a starting linebacker in 2005. Coughlin's second year coaching New York. Pierce was a captain for the Giants Super Bowl team, and he played 5 seasons there before retiring at the conclusion of 2009. Tom Coughlin is famous or infamous, depending upon who you talk to, for how he runs his ship. Quote, Coughlin time meant meetings started 5 minutes early. In the Jaguars facility, clocks were actually set back 5 minutes. As a former corporate guy, I love that. Pierce has leaned on Coughlin on advice on how to schedule things out day to day, a source says. Coughlin is a 2-time Super Bowl winning head coach and potential future Pro Football Hall of Famer. There shouldn't be any potential. Tom Coughlin should be in the Hall. Between what he did, and we'll look at it in a second, what he did with the Jacksonville Jaguars is baffling. So Pierce wants to lend his ear when Coughlin speaks. Pierce's only previous head coaching experience was 2014 to 2017 when he led Long Beach Poly High School in California. What makes it particularly unique is that Pierce could almost be described as an anti-Coughlin coach. The Raiders' locker room was up in smoke after their Week 9 win against the Giants as players danced and celebrated with Pierce, finally out from under the morale-crushing McDaniels. He then gave the players a victory Monday and a break until Wednesday, when they then prepared for their victory against the Jets. Another source tells CBS Sports that the changes under Pierce have involved taking ownership of the situation while communication has improved with everybody in the building. Players have been told to be themselves and embrace their differences, and a stronger Raiders locker room has emerged in the last 3 weeks. And it goes on to talk about the fact that what we just talked about, Mark Davis regretting not putting Rich Bisaccia into that spot. So I find that very interesting. I mean, Tom Coughlin actually did evolve over time, and in fact, I want to make sure we just take a glance at Coughlin here. I mean, guys, what he did in this was an expansion franchise. For anybody that's not old enough to remember when the Jags came in, this was an expansion franchise that in his second year won 9 games. Went 9-7, 11-5, 11-5, 14-2. A lot of people thought that team was going to win the Super Bowl. And then it fell off a little bit. Some of that had to do with the fact that Mark Brunell kind of started falling off. Brunell, I guess people don't realize exactly how good of a quarterback he was with them Jags teams back in the 90s. And then, of course, he come down here 11-5, 10-6, Super Bowl champs, 12-4, 10-6, 9-7 Super Bowl champs, and everybody remembers that team, right? And then, of course, his long history. I mean, there's a lot of hard-ass, hard-nosed, tough coaching jobs in there. I mean, Boston College, Eagles, Packers. I mean, we're talking in the 80s. Buddy Ryan kind of shit, guys. Giants, Boston College. I mean, it's just that's a very wise decision by Antonio Pierce to get Tom Coughlin's ear in this entire equation. And that just tells you if he gets perplexed, he don't know exactly what to do. What a massive asset for Antonio Pierce to have, to just be able to call up his ex-coach and be like, look, not sure what to do here. I'm leaning this way, but maybe I'm wrong. Tom Coughlin would be like, you know what? You're right. You need to do that. You know what? Brainstorm that a little bit more. Work it around. Swash it through your mouth a little bit before you decide to make that move. Ultimately, you might decide to go a different direction. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I never even thought about Tom Coughlin in all of this, but yeah, that connection is obviously seriously there. Not to mention some of the other guys he can reach out to, Michael Strahan, et cetera, right? Eli Manning. So tell me what you think, Black and White Sports supporters. Things are looking very favorably right now, even if Harbaugh is sort of blowing through the wind right now. Somebody mentioned Belichick to the Raiders. Not going to happen. You're not going to fire Josh McDaniels and bring in Bill Belichick. I just don't think that'll happen. Ixnay on the Belichick, right? That doesn't make no sense. You're trying to change the culture and you bring in a guy that's a harder ass than Josh McDaniels? No, you're not going to blow it up like that. Peace. I'm out. Till next time.
Thanks for watching the show. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to tune in next time on Black and White Sports.